So I think we're going to get started here.
But that's cool.
Any minute.
I can.
Hey, Blake. How you doing? Great. All right, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. Thank you again for coming out to Future Law. It's been an awesome time here. It's been great seeing a bunch of people. I was remarking to someone a little earlier. It's been basically an experience of seeing a bunch of people that I love and respect online and actually meeting them in person, which is always an awesome experience. So I'll let Dan kind of introduce himself, but Dan Katz will be our keynoter, and he'll close us out for the day. So Dan, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Tim. So I'm Dan Katz from Michigan State University. I'm an assistant professor there. I've been teaching for, I just finished my second year of teaching there. Among other things, I run a laboratory called Reinvent Law, and we are focused on nothing short of transforming the industry. And so I'm so happy to be here with all of you because I think we have a shared mission. So today I want to offer some closing thoughts about, where, as a legal educator, I sit in this space and the types of things that we're trying to do on behalf of supporting all of the entrepreneurial efforts of the various entities that we've seen here today. So this is a thought experiment I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, and I'll explain more in a moment. But I used to go around and give these presentations, and I would try to explain, here's the problems in the industry, here's the problems in legal education. And one time I got into a Q&A with someone and I said, if MIT had a law school, it would be the best law school. It'd be the law school for the lawyer I wanted to hire. And everybody else would have to get right with that. And so I want to walk you through a little bit of that, my thoughts on that question. So here's where things currently stand. So we're in a very privileged position to be here at Stanford University. But it's not such a great position for the rest. There's 44,000 students who are graduating law school in the next month or so, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that 22,000 jobs are going to be created per year for the next decade. That's including retirements. So even as the baby boomers retire, go to Florida or what have you, the rate of replacement is far less than the number of jobs that are being created in this space. That's a crisis. Every stretch of the imagination, people taking on six-figure debt for very unclear employment prospects. It's not just a recession. It's much more than that, and the data really plays it out. There's two trends operating at once. The first thing is the structural piece, and there's certainly a component of the recession that's driving down the demand for legal services. Or there's a cyclical piece. The structural piece started before the recession, and that's borne out by the data. So Bill Henderson, a lot of his work points to this. So basically, those jobs are never going to come back. That's law's information revolution, and it's peril and possibility all at once. My friend Larry Ribstein, who passed away in a very untimely manner, wrote 3 papers before his death, which are, to me, a blueprint for a lot of what is happening in this space. The Death of Big Law, Law's Information Revolution, and Legal Education for the 21st Century. And I encourage all of you to take a look at those 3 papers. The revolution is very much in progress, and today bears that out. We're seeing, companies, many of which are not fully mature, but are coming online in this space, and they're not all going to be winners, but many of them will. And it's, people in this room, I know many of you, some of you have differences with one another, but here's the point. It's all of us against the rest of the industry. That's how it is. So I just want to say that. If you have any difference with any of you in this room, you have a much bigger difference with the people outside of this room. Although, that's now going to be on video, apparently. Shouldn't have signed that waiver. Okay, so this industry has experienced basically zero net job growth since 1998. So all of the gains in the 2000s were taken away by the recession, and basically the number of law jobs that currently exist is about what existed in 1998. 15 years, zero net job growth. But there's a silver lining. The Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps this data on so-called other legal services. And Bill Henderson, again, from Indiana University, has been a primary person tracking a lot of that. That space has experienced double-digit year-over-year growth, and a lot of what's going on in this space is that. What's going on in this room today is a conversation about that. And so I think that, again, this current market offers peril and possibility. Let's focus on the possibility. So in light of the state of the market for legal services, how do you prepare students to survive/thrive in this new ordering? You got to provide them with skills that are undeniable. They cannot be denied. And so to do that, you have to imagine a very different type of legal education. So right now, I would just posit, maybe with the exception of a school like Stanford, most schools in this country are liberal arts colleges. Most law schools are liberal arts colleges masquerading as professional schools. We need a polytechnic legal education. We need to get right with that. Doesn't mean every school's got to adopt this. I hardly think there'll be a run to the bank to try to adopt this. But a polytechnic legal education is what the lawyer of the 21st century needs. And so I'd like to talk about some trends in the market and then come back to precisely what that exactly means. Trend number one, general counsel is legal supply chain manager. So what is one of the biggest barriers to innovation in every space, but in this space just as an applied example, is sophistication on the relevant consumer market. So clients not being sophisticated, clients maintaining historic relationships. Even if you have great technology and you have a great solution, you can't get the meeting, you can't even explain why they should pick you over your existing rival in the space. So the sophisticated general counsel is core to this story. The financial pressure placed by the recession has put pressure on general counsels. Pressure from whom? Pressure from the CFO, pressure from the CEO to say you have got to control your legal spend. And so legal gets brought in line with other C-level officers and divisions, and that is the beginning. You know, I was just talking to someone, there was a conversation about punctuated equilibrium. When was the punctuation? The punctuation was you could say it's the crisis, or it could be, as you start saying, okay, we got to cut legal spend. How do we cut legal spend? What are the tools? What are the approaches? That's when you start getting the meaning. And that's when you see some of these incumbents in the legal tech space starting to have their sort of hockey stick move. It's because there's finally demand on the sophisticated client side to actually, pick up the phone and give you a call. So you start hearing phrases like this when they talk to, when law firms and GCs interact, say, I'm not here to run your training program. In other words, don't put first and second year associates on my work. That's one piece of it, and that's why, the big law hiring has slowed down so substantially. The other piece is, if you're going to take our work, I just want to let you know, you are going to have to work with other providers. In other words, the general counsel really looks like a legal supply chain manager, and that's a very important part of this account. So you start seeing these blended teams of providers. So as Richard Susskind talks about, the disaggregation of work, the unbundling of work, and sourcing stuff to particular parties who are best equipped to actually execute on it. So you see large law firms providing high-end service provision, but with these blended teams of providers with people who are experts in the particular space. So again, this has been borne out on some of the survey research done out of Oxford Business School. So client sophistication is key to this account. It's absolutely critical. This room would be not filled to the extent it was without that piece. It's necessary. We have to collectively continue to educate the general counsels who control most of the legal spend in the United States. This is on the high end of the market. I'll talk about other parts of the market in a moment. We have to continue to educate those folks about all the possibilities out there, that they don't have to accept second best any longer. So client sophistication has reset historic relationships, and it goes something like this. Why are we paying you this much for this thing when I just had a person come in here and present to me a completely alternative solution that seems pretty plausible to me? Explain to me why we're paying so much for doc review, as an example. So it's a necessary precondition for legal entrepreneurs. Here's the second piece, trend number two, the rise of quantitative legal prediction. So quantitative legal prediction, you could also call it data-driven law practice. Historically, we rely on qualitative assessments to make decisions. We've seen a number of companies here today that are bringing analytics to this space. A hallmark of a mature industry is analytics. So if you look at modern management and any other industry other than legal, it's driven by data and human judgment, blended teams of blended streams of assessment. So you can take the insights from data and then mix it with human judgment, and those blended streams of signals, basically, are used to guide decision making. So it has already begun, and you're starting to see it trickle through the press, and these sort of bombastic headlines like "Will robots steer your job?" That's overstated, but big data meaning big law, and a lot of what we just saw in the last panel is like, how does one actually go about engineering a number of these solutions? We have a long way to go. Okay, so some examples. Here's one where it's the most mature area of in the space from a prediction standpoint. So predictive coding and e-discovery, right? That's a prediction problem. It's quantitative, and it's substituting a certain component of legal judgment. Is this a relevant document or not? Here's another piece, procurement. Here's one company in the space. There's several others. I'm just doing a heavy hit, a high-level hit here. This company has $40 billion of legal spend from Fortune 500, and they're looking for patterns in there, and they're looking for the help, guide how much should this cost, what's an appropriate amount, benchmarking costs, so forth and so on. Again, analytics. We heard from Lex Machina at one point here, and here's another company, one of the more mature ones in the analytics space, doing IP prediction. Lawyer Metrics. This is Bill Henderson's company that is focused on predicting who's going to be a good lawyer and who isn't. Again, firms use qualitative assessments to make these decisions. Sometimes data can guide that. Kingsley, a bunch of other folks, doing quantitative legal prediction. Here's another piece, retail legal services. So 70% or more of the country does not have a lawyer. Architecting solutions to this problem is obviously could be extremely valuable, and we see a lot of players in this space, but it's also very meaningful. It's a stain on the whole profession, really, what we do. We leave all these people to go alone. And a number of the companies here that we've seen represented today are architecting solutions, and they deserve our thanks. So technology-aided access to justice, but what does it require? It requires new components. It requires technology. It requires a better business model to bring price points down to what actual people can really pay for legal services. And so some really interesting stuff, obviously, because of the change in the regulatory environment in the UK, we're seeing very interesting models being developed over there. And here in the US, we have different forms of retail legal service provision. We have a number of different platforms, and we have, right around the corner, we have LegalForce, which is a branded retail legal experience. The Apple Store sort of meets a law firm. Okay, trend 4. You're seeing law firms, of course, trying to get right with this and, kind of muddling through to a large extent. But I want to highlight a few firms that are actually kind of breaking with the trend. Safar Shah being probably why I think they're so interesting. Safar Shah. They started this in 2005. Now imagine that. When things are good, they were able actually to pivot in anticipation of the world that was going to come at a time when it wasn't obvious, to start getting the process piece in place. You take the high-end legal judgment and you blend it with a much better process. You all of a sudden can start bidding on these alternative fee arrangements and winning work that you wouldn't be able to win if you didn't get right on the process piece. You're seeing these other types of firms like ClearSpire, Axiom, what have you. Okay. I think all of these trends, and I could go on at great length, there's many other trends, point to a great skills mismatch that exists in the legal market. And it's true across the entire economy, by the way, and this point's been made in a lot of other outlets. But what is needed? We need real innovation and real competition between law schools. And an end to this age of mimicry. And let me just be blunt about it. In other words, stop trying to be Harvard and Yale. They're not even that good anyway, okay? All right? The game is rigged. You're fighting on the wrong dimension, okay? Somebody's got to be Billy Beane. You got to outflank these schools by making their backhand your forehand. And just to make the point, go through these folks at these two schools and tell me that any of these folks really know anything about legal information and technology and engineering. Really? I'd love to have a debate. We can have Lincoln Douglas, and I'm Lincoln in this example. So not normative argumentation or policy making, but actually building things. Building things that help people in the world. Isn't that why people go to law school? Because they want to help people? So this is the weakness, and there have been walls that have separated legal education from the legal services market, and those are coming down. As applications dwindle, folks are going to have to be entrepreneurial inside of legal education, and I hope they will. And we're seeing really positive developments. There are a number of schools, including my school, but many others, who are trying to get right with that. And I think it's a wonderful development. But this is to keep in mind. I love this saying, yesterday's fast is today's slow. Got to keep innovating, keep getting better. It's game on right now. We're finally going to have competition between schools. Okay, so let's reboot what it means to think like a lawyer. Substantive legal expertise is not enough. It's necessary but not a sufficient condition. Law has already become law, tech, design, and delivery. Four pillars. There's too much emphasis on substantive legal expertise and not on the other. Everybody's a great lawyer. Find me one person who says, oh, I'm like an average lawyer. Everybody says they're a great lawyer. Of course, there's some gradation. We have a lot of difficulty in measuring that proposition. But process is a lot easier to measure. So if you assume like it's a wash, I can't really tell the difference, but this person wins on process, then I'm going to send the work to them over to the other. So substantive legal expertise, tech, design, delivery. These other components need to be a part of legal education going forward. Analytics, platform, AI, and computing, process, user experience, design thinking, and you hear it all in every one of these companies today. They're blending some mix and match of this stuff across the board. Business models, regulation, marketing. Okay, so how do we train these students? Well, that brings us back to this thought experiment of an MIT School of Law. There's this debate that law professors sometimes have about theory versus practice. Now, it's a silly debate, right? I mean, Larry's last paper was all about this, but I just want to say no one would ever accuse MIT of not being a house of theory. It's just which theories are relevant for the 21st century. That's the right question that we ought to be asking. So I want to just offer you a little sketch of a blueprint for what this might look like. But I just want to point out, so somebody at one of these, a law professor posted this on one of these blogs, and I thought it was true. Okay? Turns out it was April Fool's. But I was like, oh, that's a fantastic idea. Of course that makes sense. That's the only new law school that really would be useful or in demand, is let's have an MIT School of Law. Damn right we should have it. That makes tons of sense. And here's my application. So I guess I was fooled because, again, it made a ton of sense. So I just want to say that this Lawyer 2.0 is a hybrid. It's technology tasked with traditional tasks with a substantial aid of technology, so it's law and underscore. And this is not a new idea. This is an old idea. This old paper, Lawyers as Transaction Cost Engineers, is the same basic idea. So how would you build an MIT School of Law? How would you go about it? You got to attract different types of people. You have to train them differently, and you have to build relationships with the industry and connect the folks to the larger ecosystem. Stop outsourcing the work to career services offices, and people like me have to help be the advocates to bridge people into the space. So, Money Law, the student admissions edition. So systematically, schools right now, because they're posturing for U.S. News, they undervalue the following set of skills. Why? Because these folks tend to have slightly lower grades, all else equal, because the classes are harder. I taught poli-sci at Michigan for many years. These classes are harder than the classes I taught there. Again, I don't know why. I've just decided to throw caution to the wind with the camera running. We'll edit that hopefully later. But okay, so you got to go out and recruit them. You got to go out and get folks to come to you. And to do that, you actually have to have a case about why you should come to this school over that school. There has to be some there. No more glossy brochures. There has to be some substance to it. So, and the critical mass is important. And that's definitely something that's cooking here at Stanford through CodeX and what have you. You have a critical mass of people who are doing really interesting and compelling things, and you're learning from one another. You build it, they'll come, but they'll come if the rest of the team is there to join. right? So you've got to break that chicken and egg. So when you think about faculty, right, they have these hiring lines, and it biases you to the present. When you say, oh, we've got to get another torts person in here because our torts person is retired or has left. You have the backward-looking bias. Some schools say, okay, you know what, that doesn't make sense. We're going to hire the best athlete. Okay? That's fine. Which sport are you playing is the question. The best athlete in basketball is not the one I want in sumo wrestling or tennis. Are you sure that you have the right athletes? That's what schools are going to have to ask themselves. What game are we playing here? So, training and skill development for students. Here's a potential animating rule for every course should be evaluated in its light or its ability to help students compete in the relevant labor market, the legal labor market. And I take a very wide conception of that idea. There's lots of things that matter. But, I'm sure if we went through the catalog at most institutions, we could find one or two that might be might fall just a little outside of that line there. Okay, so there's uncertainty about what skills are needed. And I just point you to this is a nice article from the Times. 65% of current grade school students may end up doing work that is yet to be invented. So like, when I was in grade school, there was no such thing as a search engine optimization engineer. That wasn't even a thing. Now it's a thing, right? So the response to that is you hedge by providing lots of different types of skills that are plausibly related to the future. And if you assume that there's diminishing marginal returns on every class, then you should use the quarter system and not use semesters because, if you're, at the 9th week, I basically could take a flyer on the rest at that point, right? So why impose more requirements? So here's just some stuff that I've thrown in there as possible courses one could offer. So you see some of the traditional first year and other courses, and then you see a lot of other stuff. You see stuff like economics, finance, process engineering, e-discovery, a class in litigation, a class in the business of law, a class in formal logic, a class in process engineering, project management, what have you, accounting, design thinking, what have you. Didn't say it was going to be easy, and you're damn right there's going to be math on the exam, but a capstone project is not a paper. It's an opportunity to start to build something. And even if it goes nowhere, there's a pedagogy associated with trying to build something, about trying to be an entrepreneur. And somewhere like Babson College, it's all about that. Even if you never ultimately are successful, you learn by doing, and that is a useful thing in and of itself. So you have to build something at the MIT School of Law, and you have to work in these types of environments, an incubator, startup, an engineering lab, a design lab, a place where we do analytics and prediction. So building the ecosystem. R&D from the industry, there are tasks that the industry needs done, and that's a pretty common thing in engineering is that there's grants provided, and again, in pharmaceutical research, a similar sort of thing. Grants are provided, work is done, people learn in the laboratory environment, and they get better from it. There's also government funding for various tasks and projects that collectively benefit us all, but they may not be able to monetize. Technology transfer and patent, again, creating this ecosystem, strategic relationships. The critical mass is important because peer-to-peer education is key. It's really critical. Getting that folks together in one spot instead of having one at Iowa and one at University of Washington, one at Drake and one at Florida, having them all in one place, having a gravitational magnet, there's a multiplier effect that happens from having all those people all in one space working together. So for me, this is not a theoretical exercise, and this is what I want to leave you with. I've been a law professor for 20 months, and my goal is very simple. I'll state it right now. I want to give students professional education they need to thrive in this environment. And we are trying to build a polytechnic legal education track at Michigan State University. And we've made really good progress this far. We're not precisely fully where we want to be, but I would like to take the end and describe a little bit of what we're doing. Where did I get these classes? I went out and talked to people in the industry and said, what would it take for you to hire a Michigan State grad over a Michigan grad where I went to school, or Northwestern, or any of these other schools that are out there? And this is what Reinvent Law is all about, Reinvent Law Lab. We're helping cultivate the ecosystem, so we've been running these events, and I welcome you to any of them around the world. Dubai. We just ran an event about 6 weeks ago here in Silicon Valley. Many of you in this audience were participant. We have a lot of the videos we'll be rolling out on reinventlawchannel.com, reinventlawchannel.com. We'll have an event in London in a few weeks, another one in New York in the fall. And I just want, my group is actively engaged in research that is relevant to developing government and information products. So here's a bunch of stuff that we've been doing. Again, it relates to a lot of the companies we've seen here today. A lot of different types of stuff. Waldo. This is our version. We've been working with Waldo a little bit on this. My laws were not fully complete. It's not fully complete, but we're trying to do this confederation. You know, if one law school in every state were to work on this, it would all be solved. So we're throwing a chip in and try to help in the effort. I think we're up to 3 or 4, but you know, I don't know precisely, but and there's another. Built a little search engine, little Ngram viewer for about $3,000. So here's some courses for a new type of lawyer. Here's the classes we're offering. Here's the ones I hope to have rolled out in the next 12 to 24 months. Legal analytics, economics of the legal service market, project management, document assembly, AI, what have you, programming, basic programming class. People don't have to ultimately be programmers, but they have to know enough to understand what good and bad code looks like. That's a minimum sort of criteria. You can be the general contractor. You don't have to do all the individual components of a task to understand enough about when a task is done well and when it isn't. You have to have that level of sophistication, and that makes you a very valuable person. People who are cross-cutting like that. So, the MIT School of Law. I'm not expecting a new law school in Cambridge in Massachusetts. Here's what I'm really saying. The future isn't self-executing. It's not self-executing. None of this is inevitable. None of this is really inevitable. It's up to all of us in this room and beyond. So let's go make it happen. Let's go make it happen. Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to, we can have, yeah, if we want to have some questions, or we can, I'll just assume you agree with me and we'll call it a day.
How are the Michigan State existing professors taking what you're doing? Because you're like disrupting their status quo as well.
Well, you know, I would say in this environment, especially, again, if you get away from the bias of Stanford, anything that can plausibly produce jobs for students, it's pretty hard to stand against that in this environment. You know, I think of the Rahm Emanuel quote of "Don't waste a crisis." I think it's particularly apropos here. You know, can't say that, you know, there's a time and place for everything, even though a lot of this was true before the financial crisis and before basically the legal labor market fell apart. It's much easier to convince people to go along with stuff when it's, you know, when the world has actually changed. Ron Dolan. Hello.
Where are legal tech jobs today, and where will they be in 5 years?
Well, some of them are with those types of companies we saw here, and for every one of them, there's 5, 10 more in each of those, you know, particular verticals that they're in. And they need talented people because they're competing. They're competing for the future. And I think the point from the venture capital community is, you know, there really hasn't been that much money put into this space yet. You know, that there's this mindset, right? I understand it, is don't invest in legal, but it's one of these things, it's true till it isn't. And then you're like, well, why didn't we invest in this? Because you looked backwards and you didn't fit looking forward. Of course, it just sort of depends on how things go. That's why it's so important to continue to educate both all the consumer markets that are out there about they don't have to accept second best. Things can be better. And technology, design, better business models can help make people's experiences better. Isn't that what you're in this for, right? I mean, you know, everybody wants a salary, but I hope you have more convictions or values about why you're doing what you're doing. It's to help people make their lives better, and we can do that.
So one way of accessing information is going to law school, and one of the things that you've described is how, like, you're not sure that the information that's being delivered to most law students is like the right kind of information or whatever. But going back to the first thing I said, and maybe this is a problem that you would just sort of outsource or defer to somebody else, but you mentioned that law schools tend to undervalue and underrepresent sort of STEM fields when they, and if you emphasize that more, law schools aren't going to get any less white or any less male. And when we talk about access to information, it seems like it runs a risk of ignoring or failing to consider like really crucial aspects of this problem. Because
which problem?
Of the problem of increasing access to legal information and increasing access to the legal system. And so I guess I wonder.
Are we interested in the schools? Or are we interested in the public?
Aren't we interested in bringing them closer together? I mean.
Indeed.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that by emphasizing these specific things in the current environment, there's a very real risk of excluding already underrepresented groups who can increase access in areas where there is already not enough access.
The major thing is having a few more of those people around is very helpful. You couldn't fill an entire school full of them. There are not enough STEM applicants in the entire country. Total. It's 2% of LSAT takers. The point is getting a few more. There's the peer-to-peer education piece, and like I can say with the students that I have at the moment, having a few more STEM folks around has been really helpful because they help educate other people who have none of that background and bring their particular level up. So again, there's this sort of peer-to-peer knowledge transfer that I can't do. I mean, I just have the time I'm there teaching class and the various activities, but there's all this other time. And I'm so happy that I have as many of those folks as I do because it's made everybody better. We're a very diverse school, Michigan State. Very diverse school. But we need to get other skills. I mean, this is about getting skills to people. And I'm quite satisfied with what I've laid out.
Hi. I agree with just about everything that you're saying. One thing, though, that seems missing is client acquisition. Client acquisition, okay. Advertising, marketing, business development, whatever you want to call it. So at Legal Match, we've been helping law firms all the time. We end up having to educate them how to acquire clients. And that's the majority of the privately practicing legal industry as opposed to any other part of it. That is one massive skill set. We're not talking analytics. We're not talking data analysis, although those things would be great to know to accomplish good marketing. But it's really just the very simple concept of how do I get business. Yeah, I didn't really see that on there as much.
Okay, there was a little bit of, but I take your point. I absolutely agree. In my class this year, we assigned Daniel Pink's book to Sell as Human because we wanted to basically take the stigma away from selling things.
Yeah, attorneys don't want to sell, and that's really where the money is for them. So
it's also, again, there are people who have problems, many of which you don't even know they have problems, so part of the sale or whatever is also education about trying to make it clear that you actually have a legal problem. And you know what, if you solve it right now, it's going to be a lot smaller than when something blows up, and then, you know, the cost to you from a monetary or other standpoint are far, far worse. So I definitely take the point about sales and marketing. I think it's critical, absolutely critical. And I mean, it was on that fourth pillar. A delivery model includes sales and marketing.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like it was business development and running of practice when that's what I would say the majority of it is. So,
thank you. Okay, one more, I guess. Oh, wait.
Or you want to take both?
Let's take both, I think.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know. We're having a standoff here. Go ahead.
Well, real quick. I'm a second-year law student at South Texas College of Law, and it's a private college that only offers law courses. Do you have any advice for me on what I can do to, you know, develop the skills necessary to enter this kind of workforce?
Well, I think you should take a look at some of the classes. First of all, you should look at what every one of these companies is actually doing. I mean, the fact you're here already is a huge education. Look at what they're doing and try to figure out. So I don't know all of your background or what have you. So there's technical skills, there's sales, there's marketing, there's substantive legal expertise. So you got to keep getting substantive legal expertise for sure. That's minimum to get in. But all this other stuff, there's lots of opportunities. I mean, I don't know the specifics at your school, if you're allowed to take classes at other entities or what have you. And then, there are the MOOCs. I mean, this is an issue, right, is that the small private standalone law schools, they face a real challenge because to the extent the world starts to look more like the way I've described, and you need to have these cross-cutting skills, the fact that they can't offer it is a problem. But I'd be happy to talk to you offline, actually, about a bunch of things you might be able to do.
Great, thanks.
I'll stick around. Thanks.
Yes,
John McGinnis, please.
Northwestern Law School. This is a very interesting talk. I wonder whether it's radical enough. I mean,
well, that's the first time anybody ever said that to me.
Law school is an extremely expensive proposition. Maybe what we are thinking of is creating a new field of legal engineering to interface with lawyers, and we would have master's degrees where essentially STEM people would have some understanding of law rather than forcing them to go through a lot of unnecessary information. And we live in a specialized world where they would do these entrepreneurial things and hand things off to lawyers, or at least that would be another avenue to energize the space.
I agree that there are these additional components, that build-outs that could be done around specific skill sets that people could acquire. But I would say that, like, and you saw this challenge in a number of the conversations that we've already had today. It's not just a straightforward engineering problem. Substantive expertise is important, and inculcating that is part of what people are doing, and socializing people the way lawyers think is necessary, I think, for a lot of the types of products people want to build today, and particularly the ones as you start to move up the value chain to more complex components of what lawyers do. Having that domain expertise is going to be a necessity. So I would say yes, though I do think these master's programs as additional build-outs or skill acquisitions would make a tremendous amount of sense as well. So, okay.
Great. On a note, thank you, Dan.
Thank you, everyone.